Good afternoon, and thank you, Dean Christie and Professor Suarez Orozco. As my slides are kindly being pulled up, I would like you to know that I will be sharing how some of the schools from the University of California, Los Angeles, in the School of Education, and especially UCLA Lab School, operationalize some of the concepts shared by Dean Christie and Professor Suarez Orozco. In my role as Associate Dean, supporting the university's infant through grade 12 schools, in addition to many administrative responsibilities, I have the pleasure of supporting the school's leaders around teaching and learning and curriculum development. And I must say that one of my greatest pleasures professionally is my direct interactions with children and youth. It's a pleasure to be among you today. So we work from the premise that curriculum development involves a reciprocal process of teaching and learning around three domains which have been addressed earlier today: the emotional, the social, and the cognitive. And we also work from the premise that these three child development domains are also relevant for the relationship between the adult actors at the school settings and in the children's lives and youth across three core pillars, borrowing from Indigenous principles. The core pillars being respect, responsibility, and reciprocity. As Dr. Agnes Lena mentioned earlier in today's session, the climate crisis is a crisis of relationship. And so with our nature-based education and its approach, we actually are intentional about creating sensory emotional connections to nature. The children have ample opportunities to make those emotional connections to nature. And as has been mentioned, we know that this fosters social and emotional wellness. We also move from these individual connections to the collective, which eventually leads to agency and activism. And as Professor Carola Suarez Orozco highlighted in her section on biophilia, this nature-based education approach can help to offset anxiety and disconnectedness, foster overall wellness. So as an administrator who is charged with working with the heads of schools, with the leaders, I'm often asked, what are the conditions that are needed? Teachers need planning time. It's imperative. There need to be resources for fostering these experiential and sensory activities so that children and youth have emotional connections to nature. And we also need advocacy. We need advocacy from the leaders so that the educators and the youth can build agency and activism. And that agency and activism is modeled. It comes from and for the teachers and the youth. And when we think about curriculum design that supports nature-based education and reciprocal teaching and learning, again, we draw on Indigenous knowledge, ancient Indigenous knowledge that involves reimagining relationships. The guardians, the educators become guides. The teachers act as learners, and students act as teachers, as we saw today with Ananya and Ludolf and Carlos. Children's interests and curiosities are centered in the teacher's planning. And we operate, dare I say, from this premise that nature is sentient life and that children can be change agents. It's also important to note the curriculum design shifts that are required when doing this important work. So we move to respect. We move from a position of approaching curriculum design that is separate from everything else the children are doing. We move the classrooms from the indoors to the outdoors. And in cases where children are going to school without areas to play that are green, we try to bring those into the classroom so that these individual connections are made, so that that sensory engagement is fostered. And as much as possible, natural materials are embedded within the lesson planning. We also move from this idea of disconnected content to interdisciplinary and integrated content. And that reciprocity is also related to relationships between students and teachers and learners. And the third component is that we move from exploitation and behaviors that are focused on consumerism to responsibility so that children can start to feel ownership and they act as change agents. We cannot tell children that this work is important. They need to own it. They need to feel it. They need to want to participate in it. And that individual agency can then lead to greater connectedness and service to community. It's where we start to see action and civic engagement, where we move from protest to peer support to proposal. And it also means that we get to a place where the children internalize the stewardship. These are some photos of work at UCLA Lab School where a classroom lesson was taken outside, where again, where we are reimagining relationship between the children and the teachers and between the classroom and the environment and the natural setting. Here's another example of fostering wonder in children, this idea of reciprocity, where there's shared decision making, as one of the other, our colleagues earlier talked about the need for participatory planning. We also encourage parents as partners, authentic partners. Some examples here, and you will see more from Ms. Mobus and Ms. Morris on responsibility and shared decision making in some of the lesson planning. And dare I say joy, building on the children's curiosity makes it a little fun, as schooling experiences should be. So we move from this individual connection to collective responsibility and civic engagement. And it's my honor to introduce Ms. Victoria Mobus, who will expand on the application process of these important concepts of respect, responsibility, and reciprocity.